Too many sword fighters. That's all I hear about Fire Emblem these days. Nothing about the music, story, level design, just complaints about the hilt-to-blade ratio on the character's weapons in Smash Bros. Which, to be fair, is ridiculous. So much wasted potential. But these complaints are missing a bigger picture. Too many swordies there may be, but this isn't a Smash Bros. Problem. It's a Fire Emblem problem. Let's do some math. There have been 23 characters I'd consider protagonists in the Fire Emblem series. That includes games with multiple lords, important avatar characters, the 3 house leaders, and let's throw Lucina in there for good measure. Now, of these 23, 17 start with swords. 17! These 3 also use one as a secondary weapon, and even our glorious Lord and Savior Hector falls to peer pressure when he promotes. Across the entire franchise, the only protagonists that cannot use swords are Ephraim and Micaiah. In other words, 91% of Fire Emblem protagonists use swords, and 74% use it as their primary weapon. That's absurd. Yet barely a word is spoken about the monopoly swords have on the Fire Emblem series. I mean, for Duna's sake, the series of Fire Emblem, something that has a literal fire emblem, uses a sword as its primary symbol. There's no weapon triangle. It's skewed to such a degree that it's just another sword. This needs to be fixed. Today, we're going to talk about the class diversity in Fire Emblem, how we got to this point, and what we can do to fix it. Let's just get this out of the way. Swords are popular. Obviously. They are the most commonly featured weapon in just about everything. They're the most versatile, easy to understand but hard to master, and the variety of swords out there is truly astonishing. So of course it's going to be used the most. And with most mediums, I would be okay with that. But not Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem is a strategy-based video game, and strategy-based video games need options, they need diversity. The replay value of the game is mainly based on trying out different strategies. And that's not to say that Fire Emblem is bad at this. It's fantastic. I can't count how many times I've played through Radiant Dawn. There's so many ways to do so. Only using terrible units, only using Lagoos, Iron Man runs, cavalry runs. The diversity is very impressive. But where those options excel in so many ways, they fall flat on their face in others. For one, sword fighters are usually the only class that has options in of itself in these games. Look at Blazing Sword. Disregarding the lords, you have access to the mercenary class, as the well-rounded, better fighters. You've got the Myrmidons, as speedy glass cannons. And if you want to take that to a further extreme, you've got the utility-based thieves. And of course, most mounted units can use swords as well, either as a baseline, or once they promote. Now what if you want to use a bow? 2. You get 2 options. Kind of 4, but those 2 classes just staple an archer to themselves when they promote. No interesting gimmicks like the thief, very little difference in functionality, and 2 of them still use swords. No other weapon class gets something as cool or unique as the Assassin's Silencer ability, because those weapons don't have room to branch into unique mechanics like that. Now that is an old example. Things have gotten better over the years. A little bit. That's mostly because the lines between classes have blurred to a point that they don't really matter anymore, which I'm not terribly fond of. Was great for 3 houses, but I don't want that to become the norm. But at least these days, you'll occasionally get a flying unit that just uses axes. That's awesome. Even then, though, there's still a clear preference. And do you know whose fault that is? Western Europe. I'm not actually joking. It's the medieval setting, classic fantasy, knights and pegasi and dragons and whatnot. Of course everyone uses a sword. Which leads me to something that it pains me to say. Fire Emblem Fates was pretty good about this. Ugh. But seriously, if you ignore the terrible story and characters, level design, disturbing children mechanics, creepy incest, and, well, most of the things that plague this trio of games, the class diversity was awesome. East Asia culture versus medieval Western Europe. That opened up so many cool possibilities. An archer-lancer combo riding a giant swan, magic being tied to lances, axes, everything. Bows and staves aren't the best combo, but it's cool that the option exists. I hate the games with a burning passion, but I was delighted to see this level of creativity. And it showcases what I think is the true problem here: silhouettes. In a top-down strategy game like this, it's important to be able to assess the board at a glance, to be able to instantly tell what you're dealing with from your opponents. The more complicated a class, the more difficult it is to show that. Back to Blazing Sword. How on earth are you going to tell that a mounted archer is tanky? You only have so many pixels to work with. Be thankful that you can clearly see the bow in the first place. Even today, it's so difficult to tell mounted units apart on the battlefield. Is this a bow knight? A paladin? A dark knight? A holy knight? A great knight? A valkyrie? Does it even matter when they're all using swords anyway? But when you open the door a little more, embrace more cultures, have a bit of creativity, that's when Fire Emblem will hit a new level of greatness. Or, in other words, to really sum up my entire motivation for making this video, I want dinosaurs in Fire Emblem. But I'll table that, just for a bit, to focus on some more grounded options for inspiration first. Let's go to Southeast Asia, where some of the coolest and most intimidating military tactics resulted from the use of battle elephants. That translates into a Fire Emblem class extremely easily. High defense, increased range, extremely slow, but with an entire elephant between the archer and their opponent, you can pick off your foes to your heart's content. Let's take this a step further. Imagine if Fire Emblem mounts could exist separately from their riders, becoming their own separate units. Certain characters would start with and prefer mounts, of course, but this could allow for a whole in-depth creature management system, where your mounts grow separately from their riders. Some of these mounts might even be able to act independently. I don't expect a horse to do much on its own, really just a ferry to get units to safety. But how about a trained wyvern? It would be so cool to raise a platoon of wyverns and send them on their own to harass your opponents. It would be an entirely new subset of strategy for the game, one that opens up so many possibilities and wouldn't be that difficult to implement. This, in turn, opens up more options. Cause if Dumbo here exists as a separate entity, with his own stats and growths and whatnot, maybe even promotions for the fun of it, why not remove more limits? Elephants are huge. Let multiple units ride them. Slap an archer up there for long distance and a spear user to poke anybody that gets too close. Or plant some magic users to happily rain death from a safe perch. Mount a ballista on that thing, and you have a mobile siege engine that can move and fire, marking the first time siege has ever been impactful in this series. It sounds overpowered, yes, but this means your opponents can do the same, and you can be equally creative in how you counter each other. If your unit does get countered, well, now your elephant and two of your units are dead. There's so much potential there. So we've got a Southeast Asia faction with elephants. Cool. We can also throw in a few chinthays for mythological mounts, plenty of aquatic creatures if we want to expand in that direction. What else? Well, let's go to Northern Europe. Classic Vikings, the barbarian raider trope. A smorgasbord of different axe user classes could stem from here. Some magical warriors, whose spells enchant their weapons to deal magic damage, instead of casting spells directly. And we definitely need wolves. Fenrir, classic Norse mythology. Mounted units with stats similar to a swordsman. That could lead to some kind of wolf tamer unit. A class that summons and commands packs of wolves. Maybe even try to implement Norse giants. Convert any class into a 4-tile hit point sponge, but make them extremely weak to siege weapons. Those ballista elephants will tear them apart. Are you beginning to see the improvements here? Sure, we've left the sword problem behind. A Viking lord using anything other than an axe would be sacrilege, and an elephant rider can't even use a sword. But this has grown far greater than that. This doesn't just fix that small issue, it enhances the rest of the game as a whole. All of these different animals, mythologies, cultures coming together. It allows for there to be more complicated unit classes, while still being visually distinct. The variety grows exponentially, but the game is still able to communicate what these units do. Of course the wolves outmaneuver horses. Of course an elephant is easy to hit but hard to kill. In the same way that flying units being weak to bows has always made sense, these elements would naturally fit into Fire Emblem gameplay. And I'm not done. How about ancient Egypt? Pesky deserts getting your mounted units down? Well, some trusty camels can ignore that problem entirely. Make them highly resistant to magic or something. A sturdier, grounded Pegasus Knight would serve them well. Could also get some kind of chariot unit into the mix. Anubis-styled priests that call upon long-dead Fire Emblem heroes to fight for you. We could have giant scorpion riders. Am I going too far? I don't think I've gone far enough. Cross the seas to South America. Ancient Aztec, Incan, Mayan-styled characters. Proud warriors with obsidian weapons that call upon the spirits of animals to fight alongside them, imbuing them with boosted stats. And I've always felt that these cultures suit dinosaurs the best. Warhammer does this great. So toss those into the mix and, oh my goodness, the options are limitless. Super powerful units that you don't quite have full control over. Maybe the T-Rex eats your foes. Maybe it gets mad when it gets hurt and eats you. Lightning-fast raptors, tanky triceratops, some less aggressive, safer to use herbivores. And that isn't even dipping into fantasy dinosaurs. I could keep going and going. Phoenixes, sharks, eldritch abominations, pirates, voodoo, giant insects, metamorphs. There's an entire world of culture and mythology to take inspiration from. If we could just get out of this sword-infested setting, Fire Emblem would be unstoppable. And to be clear, I'm not saying that all of this should happen at once. We're not ready for Fire Emblem World Tour. I just want to open your eyes to how much further this series could be taken. It could start small. Just some simple faction wars. Take the Three Houses formula, but make the houses based off of West Europe, North Europe, and Egypt. After that, just slowly move around the world as the series progresses. But what about all of you? Have I sparked any ideas in your heads for some new Fire Emblem classes? The settings they could appear in, what they could bring to Smash Brothers even? Or are you purists that don't want to see the setting change? I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I've had this idea brewing for a while, and I cannot wait to see what you guys evolve it into. Big thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. I've been feeling a massive surge of productivity lately, and these folks are a big part of that. So thank you. To get serious for a moment, the world is going through a very rough time right now. There's nothing we can do to stop this pandemic. We are far past that at this point. We can only slow it down and keep it from growing out of hand. I just want to say that I hope you're all doing well, and I promise to do my best to get some videos to you to help make this boring quarantine more bearable. Like the next improving video. Tonal shifts, aren't they fun? We are talking about Smash Brothers, and this time, it's a newcomer. The first I've done since Rayman. Where Rayman is my most wanted, this is my number 2. It's a pipe dream character that will never ever happen, but I still want it with all my heart. And I'm interested to see if I can convince you all of just how fun he would be. I'll see you then.